What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So there are now 9 teams that are below 500 in points percentage to start the season. 3 of them being like the usual suspects, the San Jose Sharks, Chicago Blackhawks, and Columbus Blue Jackets. Not going to go over them, but 6 of them either have playoff aspirations like the Detroit Red Wings and Buffalo Sabres, or legit contending aspirations when looking at, say, an Edmonton Oilers, a Colorado Avalanche. So I wanted to go through these 6 teams and kind of get my level of concern. I'm not going to be over dramatic with this and like say that a team is completely missing 100%, but I'm going to look at their playoffs level of concern. How concerned am I of them potentially missing the playoffs, and then meeting expectations, what my level of concern is. Because yeah, if Edmonton, I still think they're going to make the playoffs, but if I think that I've seen enough where they might not be the true contender that we think that they are, the top contender, then I'm going to have some concern in that regard. So without further ado, let's get into it. And up first, Vancouver Canucks. In terms of playoff concerns, I'm a little bit concerned. I'm going to go with the 4 out of 10 in terms of meeting expectations. I'm going to go with the 4 out of 10 as well. The goaltending is kind of a concern heading into this season. We thought maybe Shilovs can build off that solid playoff run, but at the end of the day, some people got way too ahead of it when looking at him. Right now, he has an 830. He's not going to be that bad throughout the entire season. But when looking at the teams that they lost to, they blew a 3-0 lead to the Calgary Flames. Even though the Flames might be a half-decent team, you can't be blowing 3-0 leads. And then they lost to the Philadelphia Flyers. Tampa, they actually played pretty solid, but again, the goaltending was not very good, and they couldn't finish, especially compared to last year when they had so much goals scored above expected. But yeah, the goaltending. If I knew that once Thatcher Demko comes back in 2 to 3 weeks and he was 100% the rest of the way, I would have them at like a 2 out of 10, maybe a 3 out of 10 in terms of playoff concerns. But when you have a guy that has had reoccurring injuries, and apparently this injury, he can't have surgery to fix it, he just needs to learn to play with it, I'm going to be decently concerned based on what we've seen. I don't think it's ridiculous to say that Shilovs and Lankinen, although I really like the Lankinen pickup, might be a bottom 10 tandem in the NHL. So if they got to rely on those guys, their underlying numbers are still very solid. They're above average to good in terms of their 5-on-5 in all situations. But this goaltending could be concerning on top of the fact that a lot of guys last year had career years. They might come down in terms of the shooting percentage. I'm somewhat concerned. I got a shit ton of hate for saying that the Vancouver Canucks were not in my top 10 teams that I was most confident to make the playoffs. And again, it's only 3 games at this point. We can't massively overreact. But with this goaltending situation, with Thatcher Demko being an uncertainty, I still think they're going to make it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying a 6 out of 10, a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10. They are in a very good spot in terms of the Pacific Division. They just have to beat out like Seattle and LA for a divisional spot. But there's some concern with this Vancouver Canucks team in terms of having a regression. We definitely saw that regression on display through the first 3 games as of right now. For the Nashville Predators, for the playoffs, I'm going to go with a 3 out of 10. But in terms of meeting expectations, I'm going to go with a 7 out of 10. This team has pretty high expectations considering they went so all in this offseason. They go out and get Marchessault, Brady Shea, and Steven Stamkos. They have 1 goal and 2 assists for 3 points combined. Stamkos hasn't scored a single point thus far. Their first game, they lost 4-3 to the Dallas Stars without UC Saros. You can't really draw any conclusions with that. Then they get shut out by the Detroit Red Wings, a Detroit team that has a pretty below average, just straight up bad defense score, as well as a 37-year-old in net. We're going to talk about Detroit later, but they lose 3-0 in that game. And then last night they allow 6 goals, including 1 empty net goal to the Seattle Kraken. I'm not ready to massively over concern in terms of this team missing the playoffs because they are 6th in the NHL in terms of expected goals percentage in all situations right now. And Saros is going to bounce back compared to Vancouver, where they have so much uncertainty in net. Saros has an 855 right now, and actually the team defense has been pretty solid. They have the 3rd best expected goals against per 60 in the NHL. So I think that there's going to be some growing pains when you add 3 massive players to your lineup in terms of building that chemistry, and Saros just needs to get back on track. I have confidence that they're going to make the playoffs. In terms of being a legit contender, I might be a little bit scared when looking at that defense score. It has been a little bit shaky. So in terms of missing the playoffs, not massive concern, but in terms of them living up to expectations, I'm starting to get some concerns with the Nashville Predators. For the Detroit Red Wings, I have an 8 out of 10 level of concern for them missing the playoffs. Expectations, only a 3 out of 10, because at the end of the day, most people did not predict them to make the playoffs. I'm not going to pump them up as some team that everybody had in the playoffs. But yeah, I'm a little bit concerned when looking at the fact that Ville Husso already sent down after being brutal against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Yes, Cam Talbot did step up in a big way against the Nashville Predators, but then they also did lose to the New York Rangers. The goaltending is going to be massive on this team. Do I trust Cam Talbot to play 50 games and stabilize the net? I don't know. I think that they're going to be at a deficit in terms of goaltending and defense, and you saw that early on. In terms of their 5-on-5 play, it was pretty lackluster, 44%, which was fifth worst in the entire NHL through their first 3 games, and they're not getting the same level of shooting. They led the entire NHL by 15 goals scored for above expected. I've said it a bunch of times that they can't outshoot some of their clear 5-on-5 deficiencies. It could potentially be a long season. It's going to come down to Cam Talbot, whether he can be a half-decent goaltender, but there is some major concern, especially when you look at New Jersey. Looks like they're going to be a playoff team after missing last year. Tampa's 2-0 right now. That's going to be a team that maybe they'll be very good and completely run away with the Atlantic or something like that, but I thought they're going to be in the wild card race, as well as the Senators starting out 2-1. So I already didn't think that Detroit was going to be a playoff team, so I'm not saying like I'm going to massively overreact to these first 3 games, but definitely not ideal for the Detroit Red Wings, especially now that you're giving up on Ville Husso to potentially turn it around. In the 5-on-5, concerns are definitely still there, and you lost to a team like the Pittsburgh Penguins you're going to be battling with. The Buffalo Sabres for the playoffs, I'm going to go with the 6 out of 10 and then the expectations of 3 out of 10. Yes, they are 1-3. And yesterday I tiered them in the damn it tier when looking at fan base's vibes. But I think after looking at the underlying numbers for this team, and especially the goalie tandem, there actually is some reasons for optimism for this team. They're 1-3, but they played the Devils twice, and they also played the LA Kings, so it's not like they have like bad losses. It's not like they're losing to teams that they shouldn't lose to, and they beat the Florida Panthers. Granted, it was a Florida Panthers team without Matthew Tkachuk and Alexander Barkov and Spencer Knight in net, but that was a good win, 1-5-2. They're only averaging 2 goals per game, but they are generating the 11th most expected goals per 60 with 2.65, so I expect the offense to really start to come alive. They actually have a back-to-back right now, so maybe by the time you're watching this, they're 3-3, and the goalie tandem has looked pretty solid. UPL, not that good, but Levi has been looking very good with a 9-19 thus far, really kept them in that second Czechia game. So I think UPL is going to get back on track, and if Levi is a damn good guy for 25 to 30 games, I think there's definitely some optimism for the Sabres. Still think they're going to miss the playoffs, 6 out of 10, maybe even a 7 out of 10 level of concern, but I'm not massively overreacting to this start by the Buffalo Sabres, and Red Wings fans are going to scream at me because even though they have the worse record than Detroit, I'm less worried about them, but there's definitely concern considering this start, but I think they actually get back on track. Colorado, in terms of making the playoffs, I'm only going with a 2 out of 10. In terms of meeting expectations, going with a 3 out of 10. Goaltending's been asked. Goaltending has been absolutely asked. Georgiev has a 787 in 3 games. Their underlying numbers are pretty solid, though. They have a 56% expected goals percentage, as well as in all situations in 5-on-5. On top of the fact that the injuries are just so brutal with this team right now, and yes, they might find themselves in a hole, but right now, Netrushkin's out till mid-November. Lehkonen has at least another 2 weeks. Jonathan Churin's out in a couple weeks at this point. Landeskog, not sure when he's returning, as well as Devon Toews being day-to-day. They are dealing with brutal injuries. And yes, if they find themselves in a hole where they're 2-8, then I might start being very concerned. But I think this team still has too much talent, is too deep, and I think Georgiev is going to get it back on track. I mentioned it yesterday. He had an 897 last year, and they still made the playoffs by what was the difference between them and the 9th best team in the West, like 13 points. I think Georgiev's going to get back on track, or a guy like a Nunnin, and I think with their core, they would address this at some point if Georgiev keeps on playing bad. They're not going to settle for this level of play and being out of the playoffs. With their big 3, I think their big 3 hasn't really been outside of that first game with Rantanen having a hat trick. I think their big 3 is going to come alive and even things out until they get these guys back from the injuries. And in terms of their expectations, I'd go 3 out of 10 because they don't really have like Edmonton level expectations. And as long as they get healthy and Georgiev somewhat stabilizes, I still think this team is an extremely dangerous threat in the Western Conference. Maybe not on the same level as a Dallas or an Edmonton, but still, when this team is healthy, there's definitely concerns with the playoffs considering their injuries, but when this team is fully healthy, they are a very good team. For the Edmonton Oilers, playoffs, genuinely a 1 out of 10 in terms of level of concern. Live up to expectations. I'm going to go with the 4 out of 10, though. In terms of the playoffs, when looking at it, yes, they are 1-3 right now, but they've been pretty unlucky. They scored 4 goals, 4 of them got called back, and they really showed up in that Flyers game towards the end. They really said enough of this bullshit and turned it on. The goaltending is a major concern for the playoffs. I still think it's decent enough. It's going to be decent enough for them to make the playoffs, but come playoff time, there is concern about them being the odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup when they have this lackluster of playoffs. They got a guy like Stuart Skinner that has an 845 right now. Calvin Pickard is even worse at 779, minus 2.8 goals saved above expected for Pickard, minus 3.9 for Stuart Skinner. The fact that they didn't go out and spend like $2.5 million on an Anthony Stolarz is looking horrendous, and it's not only just the goaltending, it's the second pair with Darnell Nurse right now. With Emberson and Dermott, they both have a 33% expected goals percentage and have been outscored 0-3 right now on that second pair. So if that second pair does not step up, top pair is going to be good. Third pair is going to be very good. That second pair needs to be solid considering the fact that your goaltending is pretty below average. I'm concerned about the Oilers in terms of being a high top tier contender. They're going to make the playoffs. You got to relax on that, especially after showing some life in that Philadelphia Flyers game. But I would be slightly concerned about them being the top team in the NHL after what we've seen in these first 4 games, especially that Calgary Flames game. That wasn't even them, like the goalie shitting the bed. They kind of just got outplayed a little bit. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about these 6 teams? Who am I overreacting or underreacting to? Again, I think that the 4 Western Conference teams, they're all going to make the playoffs still. I'm not ready to like absolutely sound the alarm bells off. The 2 Eastern wildcard teams that are fighting for wildcard spots, they might be a little bit screwed after starting off a little bit slow, but I already didn't have them in the playoffs, so it's not like my opinion has changed that much on them. But let me know in the comments, what do you think? I'll be seeing you in the next one.